It's David Wildstein at the New Jersey Globe. I am joined with U.S. Senator Andy Kim, U.S. Senator just very recently from the state of New Jersey. I'm sure Cory Booker will remind you you are the junior senator
every day.
from the state, and that's and he got that for a number of years, and I guess that's his turn. Uh, but Senator Joey Fox wrote, had a great interview with you recently, and he wrote a story for the Globe about what kind of senator you want to be. And I thought it would be interesting to sort of do an exit interview with you about your 3 terms in the House of Representatives. And I mean, this is sort of, you've got a new job. It's sort of with I might say the same company in a different department, but it's a new job. And a lot of times when people, leave their old job on very good terms, they do an exit interview, and that's what I was looking to do here. I mean, it may be the last one from the House. It's not typical at all for U.S. senators to return to the House. So I guess that's sort of behind you. But let me start by asking you what you got to Congress January 3rd, 2019. You had served in the executive branch, State Department, at the White House. You'd really never been around a legislature before. What was good and what was bad about the U.S. House of Representatives?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for doing this.
Uh,
I think it's good to be able to have a chance to be able to reflect and, think back and, try to figure out how it shaped me, but also, the work that I want to continue to do. In terms of your question, like the good and the bad, I mean, I guess I'll just start by saying, like, I when I first got sworn into the House January 3rd, 2019, like I just remember I had really little idea of just like what I had gotten myself into. I remember showing up at orientation and just being blown away by just the national media, like they were just like zooming in on us newbies and the issues that we were facing. It was overwhelming. I have to say, the challenging part, and I'm sure we'll get into this, was just the nonstop like campaigning. Like it really is something I just could not let down. Like I had to keep going. I felt just this pressure to just be able to mobilize. And that was really hard, just not feeling like I took a break. I do feel like, I mean, just right now, having finished my fourth election in 8 years, I feel like I've been campaigning nonstop for about 8 years, and it's exhausting. I feel tired. Um, the good side, though, is like it was really amazing to be able to get to know another branch of government. Yeah, as you said, I know the executive branch well, like the White House inside and out. Um, and I feel really blessed that like as a son of immigrants, like that I know the White House and the Capitol building so intimately, two of the greatest buildings of our country. I've had a chance to be able to work inside, to have a chance to be able to serve there. Like not a day that goes by. Like every day I'm at the Capitol, I still try to spend about 15 minutes in the rotunda just to be able to kind of ground myself. Like I never lose that. And like being in the House was extraordinary, just in that kind of capacity in terms of just adding another layer, another chapter to my service. And it just made me like love this country, love this government all the more. So I feel blessed about that experience.
I mean, you were one of a very large group of people. 400 and 435 members plus the delegates and commissioners. Uh, you know, we've talked about this before. You started at a small college. This was a big group. I mean, what was it like to go to work where you had all these people of varying levels of prominence and power and influence?
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, it's still to this day. I remember actually just a couple weeks ago, like I was at a function at the Library of Congress, and I like saw another member of Congress like wearing the pin, and I just like was like think I like went up to them. I'm just like, I don't know who you are, like, and like it was just like somebody like it's like kind of like a like a high school in that way, and like you'll
Yeah.
just kind of run into people still that you're just like, I've never talked to you, like. Um, but like I think for me, like I came in with a very large class. I mean, I can't remember exactly how many, but I thought it was like 80 something or what. And like so I became I came in close to a number of them, like like we were kind of had some friendships kind of initially just from the campaign trail, so that kind of helped. Our class of 2018 very much has like a very tight identity, and just camaraderie amongst that, so that helped. And you know what? And what the other thing that was actually helpful was like a number of them were in a similar situation where they hadn't served in legislature before. So I didn't necessarily feel out of place. In fact, like I think a lot of us felt like it was good for the House to have an injection of people that come from different backgrounds. And especially national security backgrounds. There were like a number of us, like a solid like 10 or 12. I feel like that kind of came in with national security background, and so I think that really kind of helped us kind of navigate that transition. So that was a really good, and something that I was proud of.
I've always I look back and I know I always geek out on you whenever I talk to you on these things, but I've always felt the intent of the founding fathers was to have an eclectic legislative branch. That not everybody was supposed to be the same, and not they certainly didn't imagine people coming and staying 20, 40, 50 years there. I'm sure it's good to have institutional knowledge, but how what were your observations during that first term going into Congress, where you had the same vote as everybody else, but you didn't have the same power as everybody else. You
Mhm.
couldn't get everything done to this level that somebody who had seniority over you. What was just sort of your reaction to that system?
Yeah, I mean, like, especially because I came from the executive branch, right? So, like, I came from a different branch. And I think that this was something that I really came to understand on the House side. Like the concentration of power is too much. It shouldn't be that strong. Like, I feel like I feel like the Speaker of the House has more control over the legislative branch than the president does over the executive branch. Like, just in terms of like how much that one person can basically dictate the legislative agenda of America, and that's just too much. And like when you see just like the concentration power, I mean, like still to this day, chair people certainly yield and wield power, but a lot of that feels like it's been taken away over time as well and placed in leadership in the speakership. I mean, certainly the Senate has some elements of that too, but I don't think it's as much as the House of Representatives in terms of what I was expecting. It was frustrating at times, especially in 2020. In 2020, I was one of only 7 Democrats in the country to win a district Trump won, and our House majority was only 5 votes. So, I very much felt like, I helped deliver that majority. Like if me and 4 other Democrats in these Trump districts, if we lost, we would not have had the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and Science Act, the Rescue Plan, the infrastructure law. Like I really felt like I helped deliver that majority, that I was 20% of the House majority. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you get to you know play a bigger role in the legislation, right? And like I think on the Senate side, again, we can talk about that down the road. But I think that there is a little bit more of a sense of being able to wield some power if you're a deciding vote in that capacity. But the House was just not the same. The House is very much built around kind of coalitions, sometimes caucuses, but other groupings. And it's kind of a maneuvering between these different groupings, and being able to kind of build in that way. And the longer you've been there, yeah, like the longer and if you're a chair or ranking member, the more ability you have to kind of move some of those groups. But it's a real challenge. It definitely has a lot that I looked at and just, really felt like there's so many better ways to be able to kind of navigate this. But again, the main takeaway was about that concentration of power that still to this day I think is a problem. And I think that's the kind of issue that, like I'm open to term limits. I've thought about that, and there's actually a bipartisan group of us in the House that were talking about term limits for Congress, for the Supreme Court. But like I do feel like if you just do term limits and you don't address like the money in politics, you don't address like the gerrymandering, you don't address like this concentration of power, you're not really getting at it. Like the key, like the thing that you try to think through is like, what is it that you're actually trying to achieve? And what you're trying to achieve is a government, elected officials that are more beholden to their people that they serve, their constituents. But if you don't solve the big money and the donor class and all that, you're just going to have people cycling through at shorter intervals, but they're still going to be beholden. In fact, they're now going to be thinking about their onward jobs, so like they may be, having conflicts of interest or doing things that might set up their next job,
Mhm.
so I think that that's something I've been trying to unpack and try to figure out what does that actually mean in terms of reforms.
I remember when you ran the first time in 2018, you were as a candidate tentative about Nancy Pelosi because remaining as your party leader and becoming speaker. And your first day in Congress, I think if I have the order right, you actually vote for speaker before you take your oath. You voted for Nancy Pelosi. Uh, was Do you have any regrets? Was that the right move for you, for the country, for the House at that point to have her there?
Yeah, I think that if it wasn't her, like I'm sure there would have been another person that would have been capable in that kind of way. I did see, in those 2 years when Trump was still president at that time, she was able um, to navigate that in a way that I was impressed with at times. Just in terms of keeping the Democratic coalition together, keeping us disciplined in terms of votes. But and you could even tell. I mean, President Trump was, I think, someone who was impressed with her ability to wield power and keep things unified in different ways. Because, like, I look at that contrasting with what we saw with Kevin McCarthy, for instance, and what we see with Speaker Johnson. You see how it's difficult. It's difficult to keep a
Yeah.
majority together. And I do think that she was probably better at that than anybody I've seen so far. In terms of my time in elected office. Um, and look, I mean, I will say, like, to her credit, like she did decide to step down from leadership, and give space for Hakeem Jeffries and younger leadership, and to kind of step up. Like, I think that that was something that was really respected. People appreciated, her understanding that things need to move forward in terms of leadership. So, that's as I look back on it, I think that was certainly one of the best moves that she made. At that time, really setting the tone for what comes next.
I know this is probably a tough question because you have a reputation of just being a very nice, respectful man. Not necessarily everybody who served in the House with you, was like that. Uh, who are the people you just genuinely dislike? There had to be somebody who, whether it was for personal reasons or ideological, who are the people that if you never speak to them again, you're fine?
Yeah, yeah, I will be honest. It's tough for me to name some names.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let me think through that. I guess just the main thing I'll just say is like, and I've talked about this before. Like, what I just can't stand is, the performative governance side of things. Um, just people that are just making spectacles. They just they're just and look, I mean, there's no there's no question about one of them. I've even kind of came out against his nomination, but like Matt Gaetz and I, like I just had a hard time. Like I do not agree with him in terms of his approach on politics. He said this line once. I can't remember exact word for word, but it was something to the effect of like, if you're not on the news, you're not governing. Something to that effect. And I just fundamentally disagree with that as a statement, because like I think that like when you say something like that, what you're basically doing is you're equating attention with governing. And if that's the case, then you can see how that just sets a dangerous slippery slope in terms of just people saying outrageous things to get on the news. Like if
Mhm.
you think getting on the news is governing, then it incentivizes you to take crazy positions or to say inflammatory things because
Yeah.
that's what's going to get a reaction. So I just like that's just something that I found really frustrating. And there are a number of people that kind of fit that bill that, I won't go into all their names, but it's a challenge and it's something that I found really frustrating, especially coming from the executive branch where I was a career person, and so, it was really just about rolling up her sleeves, doing the work, kind of grinding it out in that way, no cameras around. And and I just think that that was something that I struggled with. The other aspect of this is like, when you see that, when you see people getting attention, getting on the news, like there is part of you that's like, am I supposed to be doing this?
Yeah.
And like, so like the way I kind of talk about it, David, is
Yeah.
like I kind of say like if Congress was a game, if Congress was a video game, if you gamify Congress, like what is the point system? What is it that like means that you're succeeding at that game? And like based off of what I've seen, it's like, money raised, money that you raise, send out an email after you do a TV hit or something. Followers on social media, like likes and viral videos. Like, but where in that gamification point system is like passing good legislation? Is like, doing like real oversight, not just like having your 5 minutes in a committee hearing being like your chance to make another viral video. I just saw so many people kind of like trying to build a better mousetrap and like, trying to copycat what other people are doing that seem to be successful and viral. And I just thought that to be very bizarre and frankly just very difficult to work with some of them because of that.
So let me give you the flip side. This might be more comfortable, but you had a lot of colleagues. Some of them your age and younger, not much older than you. Anybody there that you looked at and thought to myself, "Wow, I could see this person as president of the United States someday."
Oh wow, yeah. Oh, well, that's a high, that's a high bar. I well look. What I'll just say is like the people that I kind of gravitated towards, the people that I just felt like they had real talent. Like I wouldn't necessarily say like I'm using like the can they be POTUS one day as the bar, but like my closest friend in the House of Representatives is a congressman from Colorado, Joe Neguse. Somebody who he's a young dad. There were a couple of us young dads, and him and Jason Crow, and others like we Colin Allred. Those are some of the people that I was closest to. Like we really connected with each other. And they are all very talented in their own right. Joe Neguse was extraordinary in one of the impeachment trials. Jason Crow is another one. Colin Allred and I, we were roommates together our first year
Yeah.
in Congress. Me and a former, NFL player, the but like, I was blown away by his campaign for Senate, and I wish he had pulled it off. It was a tough year, but look, like if Colin Allred won that Senate race in Texas, immediately people would be like, he's gonna run for president. Like those are the kinds of people that, that we would kind of want, people that have those really extraordinary stories. In terms of just like raw talent, I mean, obviously the greatest experience I had in the house was being able to work with John Lewis, a personal hero of mine.
Yeah.
Like I don't get starstruck. I'm not somebody that tries to muscle my way to the center aisle of the State of the Union, things like that. But meeting John Lewis for the first time was one of the few moments in my life where I like stuttered to get words out of my mouth. Um, he was impressive. People like, Jamie Raskin, like just, I don't always agree with everything he says and all his positions, but like he's talented. Like somebody who can think that quickly, off the cuff, be able to debate, be able to engage. Those are, that's impressive. Like there are others that are just very good, just like retail politicians, like people that can like just really be able to connect with people. So it's been interesting to like just sort of see some of that talent, and to see like the different ways that one can do this job, the different ways one can do politics. Like I do it in a very different way than others. And other people have different talents and different approaches, and that's been interesting to sort of see everyone. Each of us has the same job, but we come at it often in very different ways.
Isn't that how it should be? Isn't that better that everybody's not cookie cutter? Your music knowledge is much better than mine. Was the folk song "Little Boxes"? Full of ticky tacky, and
Yeah.
you're not all supposed to be the same. You're all supposed to be different, and then collaboratively, that again, I think that's what the founding fathers wanted, is a group of different people with different experiences and different styles who can then come to Washington, collaborate, and write, solve real problems and advance the country.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. The challenge, though, is like in the recruitment and the capacity to run a campaign, that narrows it just dramatically. Like the number of people that have the resources on their own to run, or that have a network that they can, that can raise. Like you're reducing it down to certain types of jobs, certain types
yeah,
of profiles. And like I just remember the first time when I was first running, and the first question is always like, how much can you raise? Well, actually, back then in New Jersey, the first question was like, can you get the line, right? And hopefully that's
yeah.
going to change now. But in other states beyond New Jersey, the first question you get asked is like, how much can you raise? And I was just like, I don't know, like, and like it's very tough. And like what I found going through that process is that it's not just about how much time people spend raising money that's a problem. It's that it affects fundamentally the kind of people that step up to run for office to start with. And so that's one of the biggest problems of this of big money in our politics, is it homogenizes the types of credentials one needs often. Now there's always going to be exceptions to that, and there'll always be places where the people can kind of break through in different capacities. But I see, it's that question, like when I first started running, it's this question of like who's viable, right? That's the word, viability. And like that word viable so often can be used as a means to say like who's central casting, who do we like think like has the profile. And that can be very, very, very difficult, for some people that come from different backgrounds, just being dismissed. And then when you're in Congress, yeah, like there is a, not necessarily like an expectation, but kind of like a way that you're you feel like you need to approach it, and if you want to succeed. And I see people just immediately starting to do that. Like if you want to rise up in leadership, you got to start raising money for other people and go visiting their districts. And like there's just sort of this path to it. And like one of the things that I'll just say I think it was one of the most broken things when it comes to Congress and when it comes to the hyperpartisanship in this country is how leadership is chosen in Congress. Like I was in a competitive House district for my time in Congress, and you, I don't have the time to like raise money for other people because I'm raising it for my own races.
Yeah.
And there's just sort of this feeling, like this understanding that like if that's your situation, you're not going to rise up in leadership. Like the people that rise up in leadership are often from the deepest blue, deepest red seats because they have the time to not worry about their own race and instead raise money for others and go visit their districts and spend time, meeting like different groups and raising money into, PACs and super PACs, leadership PACs, because they don't necessarily need it in their campaign in the way that I
Yeah.
did. So like, that's the kind of stuff that like that frustrates me, and some of the challenges that you see in terms of how people find themselves and what paths they take in Congress.
And I guess as we spoke earlier about, not every member of the House is equal, and you're very much, a circumstance of your own geography. You ran in a competitive seat. You beat an incumbent Republican congressman, not by much, and Donald Trump won your district twice. You had to do a lot of call time in those first couple years in Congress and the House. Uh, how does that take away the requirement that you do call time, the requirement that you be regimented to raise millions of dollars? You only have a certain amount of time every day. How much does that take away from a member of the House's ability to actually work on legislation and nitty gritty stuff in committees and do all those things to effectuate the change that everybody promises in their campaign?
Yeah. My first campaign, the 2018 election, I did have to do a lot of call time there,
Mm.
especially because I was, brand new. People didn't know who I was, and my network was not particularly strong. I will say that once I won, we came to realize that my strengths when it comes to fundraising is less call time and more events, like fundraiser events, like these house parties I would do, and
Yeah.
travel and things like that. So I actually did probably less call time than most members that are in tough districts. But that aside, I mean, it's still, the fundraising side just still takes up a lot of your time. But I was not one of those people that would like, have a regimen of like 3 hours a day, and they go sit in a cubicle at the DCCC office or something like. Some people do that. That was not kind of my approach, but it nonetheless takes a lot of time, and and that kind of frustration. Now, what I will say is like, I was proud that I won a district Trump won in 2020. I was proud that I could help deliver the majority, like especially that 2020 election. Like I went into that election very much realizing that like I could lose this thing. Like I approached my first years in Congress with this, understanding like this could be it, and then I would probably go back to, being in national security, try to work in that kind of field again. It was the 2020 election that was the one that kind of opened me up to this idea that, oh, actually maybe I can do this. Maybe there's like, maybe I'm good at this. Maybe there's a way that I could do this for longer than 2 to 4 years. I originally came into office thinking that I would just kind of do it through this Trump era, like, until
Yeah.
whenever, he was kind of no longer on the stage, which unfortunately is turning out to be a longer period than I was hoping. Um, but like that was kind of the approach that I had kind of taken. But the fundraising's tough, and I think that for me, I just had to kind of find a way to be able to do it that just like didn't break my soul, right, and like didn't
Yeah.
just like hollow me out as a human being, But I felt like I found a way to do it, and in fact, the way that we ended up doing it was something that I think really strengthened my ability as I did this Senate race. Being able to do all these different house parties, being able to like create a sense of momentum and energy. Um, that was helpful. So I'm glad I found a way that I could do it and feel like I was being genuine about it and playing to my strengths.
Yeah, I mean, I want to, go back to, literally your house office. One of the things that I was, I noticed on your social media early and kept watching it is you had this tally board in the office of the number of casework issues. I mean, this is one of the reasons you're elected, is to help solve people's problems within your own district that they were having with the federal government. I know you were proud about that. I know you were proud about dollars delivered to the third district. uh uh I don't remember. I don't know if you know the number offhand, approximately, but you did. I mean, it was thousands of cases, right? I mean, it was.
hmm Yeah, it was thousands of cases, and so that was something that we knew from an outset that we wanted to do well in terms of constituent services. Um, and like that was something I felt strongly about. Like, I had set up this approach of trying to be uh accessible. Like accessibility was like a major pillar that we engaged in early on with our office. So like this promise to do all these town halls, for instance, that was stressful. It was something
Yeah,
my team was like, maybe we don't do that many of them. But once I started doing them, uh, we actually realized that like I actually think that was one of my biggest strengths, was that I was willing to go out there, and it taught me a lot. Like I got better as a public speaker. I got better as a communicator. I got better as someone who's trying to hone my empathy to flow in all directions, not just people who agree with me. Um, and so and that was really what unlocked the constituent service approach too. Is like at these town halls, you just hear from people about challenges that they're facing. I came to realize like very few people come to a town hall. If they have a chance to ask their elected official one question, they don't often ask about something that's like on cable news or the front page controversial issue. They often ask something very personal about some challenge in their own life, like Medicare or Social Security or flooding or something like that. So like I just kind of early on kind of recognized that. The other thing was like, I came into office when Trump was in the White House and Mitch McConnell controlled the Senate. So like I knew early on that like I was not going to be able to make convincing numbers and progress I can report back to constituents in terms of number of bills passed, for
right.
instance.
Yeah,
So that first 2 years, the question was like, well, how do you define success? How do you define impact in governance during divided government? And that was, I think for us, we've really tried to show that constituent service is a place where you can succeed no matter who is president. Like you can
yeah.
do well no matter if someone holds a trifecta or divided government. You control that. And so we just went hard in on it. I had the majority of my staff in the district rather than in DC. I think we were potentially the only congressional office in the country that made that decision. Um, and there were trade-offs. It meant we had a smaller policy team. It meant, smaller comms team. But I mean, the things that we were able to get done, and we saw how quickly that develops a reputation. How quickly people start to know you for certain things. And the last thing I'll just say on this point is, um, I am so grateful for my staff. And I think that that's something that we don't always give credit where credit is due. They're the ones that are grinding this out. Like I'll have someone stop me at Wegmans and be like, "Thank you so much for helping me on this issue about Medicare for my mom." Like I don't. I most likely did not engage on that specific case. There are some that I
Yeah.
do, but like like the staff, setting that tone, hiring the right staff, and believing in them, creating that kind of approach, I really do appreciate that, and they're the ones that are just doing incredible work in that kind of approach.
Yeah, and I've worked with your team, and objectively, you had a great staff, and one of the things I noticed, in your 6 years, relatively light turnover
Yeah.
of staff, and that's more unusual than I think people realize on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I mean, I really try to create an environment that is like no drama,
Yeah,
but also like, as flat as possible. I think it's somewhat helped by the fact that like I was a staffer. Like I
yeah,
worked as a
yeah. That's a good point.
as a staffer, like I know what it's like to have a principal that yells and screams. I know what it's like to have a principal that takes time to learn about you and spend time with you. um, so I was very conscious about that. I try to try to be forward in terms of paying salaries, and like I have a very strong belief that that public service should not be a synonym to sacrifice. I try to think about service in a sustainable way. Also for me as well, like I want it to be sustainable for me and my family. But I'm not interested in like burning people out. Like my first job at the State Department, I think I was earning like around like 35,000 a year in DC. It was tough, and like I it was hard. And I saw a lot of talented people my generation not do public service because they could get six-figure jobs at McKinsey or Google or others, and like I felt the attraction towards that too. I didn't go, but I understand why people do. Like, so I want to try to bring people in, treat them with respect, show them that they can have a good and decent life doing this type of work. I try to be very forward on, on ability for people to be flexible for healthcare, for kids, because I also need some flexibility with my own
Yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Um, I never ask somebody to pick up my dry cleaning or I drive myself to pretty much everything. Like I just like I try to do things in a way that engages. So I'm proud of that we had little staff turnover, um, and that we try to create an environment that people um, like to be in, and want to do the
Yeah.
work because they're just like a lot of them are young. They just want to serve, and I admire that so much because I know that's sometimes unfortunately kind of rare these days that you have people that want to dedicate their life to service so badly.
As one of the things, and this, before we wind it up, because I know your time's, it's always been valuable, but it seems like, wow, Andy Kim's a U.S. senator. He's got to have, better things to do in the evening than spending all this time with me. So I do appreciate it, but when when you were running for Congress the first time, and when you first began your service in the House, you had a really vibrant, impactful daily newspaper anchoring your district, the Burlington County Times, and we've seen that paper, go from being really important with a wide readership to, it's sadly just a shell of its former self. How do you know, how do you see the media landscape? What's happening to the media in New Jersey and across the country? Small papers not being competitive. Uh, how 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 scary is it that a member of Congress might not be able to communicate to their voters what they're doing for them without paying out of their own campaign funds to do so?
Yeah. No, it's a challenge, and this is something that I get really caught up in here down in the political world of like so often in DC people are obsessed with this question of like what's the right message, and that's obviously a very important question, but like there are also like two other questions I think are so important. Another one is like who's the right messenger, and the third one is does the message you're trying to convey actually reach the people that you're trying to communicate to? And so often the answer is no. And so, it's a real challenge here because I've seen how how local press in particular, it does such an important job in terms of being able to help draw attention to certain issues, but also like be able to do it as like another validator, as a place where people can go and feel like there's a certain consistency. And like I think that that's what we're losing right now. Like, look, I started my own newsletter during COVID times, and I tried to do my best to just provide straight information, and we had tens of thousands of people that were getting it. But like, it's still coming from me, and I think like having like local news to be able to be sort of another eyes on, to be able to give people another vector, another direction of information, and be able to like use that as a means to like take a step back, question what they're hearing directly from their local official, and see whether or not they feel like they're getting the full picture and the information. And I think that that's a challenge, and especially right now, because like what I often say is like information, and I'm not, I'm not the one that came up with this idea, but I'm a deep believer in it. But this idea that like information is no longer the scarce resource in our society; it's attention. Attention is arguably the scarcest, resources that
Yeah.
we have in the world right now. And when you are losing, you know, those kind of gates of attention, and you see things kind of devolving into the morass of social media, for instance,
Yeah.
where like there's just less of a sense of credibility, and uniformity and consistency there. It's enormously difficult and challenging to be able to operate within. So we're really struggling in New Jersey. We already were by just having the difficulties of the low number of TV stations that are focused on us and not Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, New York. And it's just getting worse and worse. So it's a real challenge right now, and the people that are losing the most are the constituents.
Yeah. So you're going to be succeeded in the House by a friend of yours, an
Mhm.
ally, Herb Conaway, uh, longtime assemblyman, probably somebody you had heard about and knew of
Mhm.
when you were growing up in Burlington County. I'm sure you and he, the two of you have spoken about the third district, the transition. What's the real advice that you've given him about representing your old district at a time when I'm not saying that you're not going to continue to represent the third, but you've got all 12 of them to service and to represent and to establish relationships with. What's the best advice for Herb Conaway in order to follow in the footsteps of Andy Kim, or to be his own man and be an
Yeah.
effective congressman?
I mean, like he has so much more experience as a legislator than I have had. So
Yeah.
he's gonna do it his way, and he should. I've urged him, and he's gonna continue up with that focus on accessibility. I think that that's so important in terms of being able to navigate, and he'll find his own ways to be able to do that. But that was kind of the main thing that I encouraged him to keep up, is just really giving off that sense of accessibility, being there. And that's one of the hardest things that we're going to see on my end here as I'm in the U.S. Senate. I mean, like the U.S. Senate's in session in D.C. well more than the House is next year, for instance. And and going around a state of 9 million people. um Herb has represented a good chunk of this before, and like I think building that personal connection as much as you can with people is critical. So, and I'm not just talking about for political, for winning elections and for political
Yeah.
benefit. I just mean in terms of being able to do the work. um So I know he wants to continue to try to do work with the Joint Base with veterans, and that's something that was such a key part of the work that I did. Like one of the, if you ask me like what are my proudest achievements in Congress, certainly the prescription drug legislation that I was able to do in capping out of pocket costs, like starting this January 1st. My law, like my part of the law, is going to go into effect, and no senior in America starting January 1st will ever have to pay more than $2,000 a year or $166 a month for their prescription drugs. Like that was mine, and I
Yeah.
can't wait for it to come into effect and see how it helps people. But the other aspect was like I got to go to the not just the groundbreaking, but the opening of that VA health clinic in Tom's River. Like that's the kind of stuff like that just means so much to people, and I hope Herb, continues to find those tangible ways to be able to, connect in and to be able to make that mark. I'm sure he will, and I hope to be a partner on the other side of the Capitol, working with him in a bicameral way to do so.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of tradition of congressmen from the third district, making the joint base a priority. I think I think Congressman-elect Conaway is, the first to have served at the joint base.
Yeah,
Uh, and I just think that's an important connection, isn't it, between the third district, in terms of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, liberal or conservative. There's been this tradition, whether it was whether it was you or Tom MacArthur, John Runyon, John Adler, Jim Saxton. I mean, going way back to Ed Forsyth, who I remember as a young staffer on the Hill. So I'm dating myself, but that's sort of that's been the priority. The men and women who serve at the joint base, who work there, the civilians, the people who live there, the importance to the economy is I think that was sort of a hallmark for you,
yeah.
and I assume it's going to be a hallmark for everybody going forward.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I grew up in the Saxton era,
Yeah.
and he was, I really tried to lean on him. He was a good mentor to me in my early time in Congress. I sought his advice a lot, and yeah, I just think it helps set a tone, and I think the tone is the right one for this congressional district. Just given its location and its dynamics. So yeah, I know that Herb wants to continue that one way or another and continue to work on that. I plan to do so. Yeah, kind of statewide and certainly engaged in that way. And look, I hope it's something that New Jersey is proud of. Like I hope we're proud of being able to host these incredibly historic and legendary bases and military installations. And one thing I'll just say like here is like we're like a year and a half away from celebrate our 250th anniversary as a country. And that's something that Herb and I and others will be able to be members of Congress for. And like I've really been pushing and saying like let's make sure we don't miss this moment. Like this is not just about having some amazing fireworks display. Like I hope people see this as a moment where we can try to invest in civics education, try to push forward. Like I've been trying to push forward a national service program to try to rekindle this sense of service that I think has been fading. I mean, as someone who's been worried about recruitment into our military and public service, like we see a challenge when it comes to the propensity to serve. Like younger people or just Americans writ large right now have less of a desire to serve our country one way or another than in the past, and I think that that's a problem. And I'd like for us to take that seriously and really try to engage that, going forward. And I think using the 250th anniversary hopefully is a moment where we can draw attention, not just to celebrate our nation's birthday, but to like ask ourselves, like, what does it mean to be an American right now? Like, what is it that is, bringing us together? And so, that's something I feel very strongly about, especially after my time in the House.
Yeah, and the last question, my final one is you and I always we seem to talk a lot about family, and the role of your the impact that your children have had, your sons on on your life and your career. I mean, I think I've seen a photo of your oldest son in the Oval Office, and and he was with you when you took your seat in the House, and now here they were. You're sworn into the United States Senate. Now they're wearing suits on the Senate side of the U.S. Capitol. So let me close by asking you this: what do you think the perception of the House of Representatives is, as through the eyes of your own sons, and
Yeah.
having really grown up without any real impactful memories, other than their father being a congressman? uh, what do they think of the House of Representatives? Do have they have is this an institution that they've really liked? Do either your sons say, Dad, I'd like to be a congressman someday, or have they looked at it and said, wow, this is do they know already they don't want to do this, that they want to please their grandparents and be a doctor or a lawyer? So
Yeah, my older son has for half his life, he's 9 now, he's wanted to be a marine biologist. The other one, I think, wants to be an engineer or a scientist or something like that. And so they can help fulfill those dreams of Asian parents that I fell short of. But the thing that I love about them is they have kind of grown up in this time in Congress. They were 1 and 3 when I started in Congress, so they were real just babies still. So they don't really remember, a time before I was in politics. And I don't like, I'll be honest with you, like David, like they generally think of politics, at least so far, as the thing that takes me away from them. So like, I don't necessarily think they've had a really great impression of it until recently. The Senate race, they were of the age, as well as that got sort of like national attention and other things where like, they did start to grapple with this and understand it. I would say like my younger son, I remember last election, not this one, but the my reelect in 22. He saw like my neighbor Matt would put a Andy Kim for Congress sign in his lawn, and my son turned to me. He's like, "Why doesn't Matt put his name on his sign?" Like he clearly didn't understand like what my job was and why people were doing this. But this time around, like they really started to get it, and like on election night this past time round, like I really could see that. Like for the very first time ever in my life, I could sense a real genuine pride that they had in me, for what I had accomplished. And that was really, something I'll treasure for the rest of my life. But they have an ease at the Capitol. They feel very comfortable there. They haven't been there that many times because, being based in Jersey, but like especially during the pandemic when they weren't in daycare because it was shut down, we would kind of travel as a family. So, they kind of grew up, they learned how to scooter and bike ride on Capitol Hill, like actually going down the hill. They feel very comfortable in the Capitol building. They love giving tours now. And just the other day, before I went into the Senate chamber for swearing in, I went back into the House chamber with my kids, kind of one last time as a member of the House, and like I could tell it was meaningful to them, and like I think that they've gotten to know that room. They've gotten to meet John Lewis. They've gotten to see me, deliver speeches there. Um, so I don't at this point think that they're gonna pursue politics. I could be wrong, um, but I think they will respect it. And I think they will respect it, and as they get older, hopefully they will, and they as they learn the fuller history of our country at this particular moment, I hope I hope down the road they're proud of what I did.
that's great. I'm sorry, Mike. I cut out for that very last word of yours, but Senator Andy Kim, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I enjoy these little these chats that we have that aren't
Yeah,
they're just freewheeling about life experiences. I think it's important for elected officials to sort of have a more time than the 30-second soundbite to let everybody know who they are. So thank you very much, and it's always a pleasure, and hopefully we'll get to do this again soon.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I always appreciate it. I always love chatting with you. So thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Senator.
Take care.